Well, hey everyone! Welcome to our last Copilot webinar of 2024. Boy, what a ride it has been, and I can't believe the holidays are among us. And what better of a subject to go right into it than to talk about something real light and lighthearted, which is Copilot for Finance. Now, while I'm partially kidding, hopefully you're going to have some fun here. We're going to get a lot out of it, and especially you're going to get to meet Joey Martynowski, our Director of Finance here at Managed Solution, who gives us a lot of insight on his day-to-day world in terms of planning budget for 2025 and what are the tools that are going to be really effective and efficient for him. My name is Jeff Lizerbaum. I'm a pre-sale solutions architect here at Managed Solution. And let's get right into the agenda. Like I said, you're going to meet Joey. We're going to have a little talk, so to speak, on how we could do better planning on budget strategies and reconciliation of statements and things like that. Let's dig into also, is Copilot really worth it? You know what? It's a pretty expensive license, but what is the ROI potentially that you could get out of it? We're going to review that. Then we're going to go right into the demonstrations of not only Copilot for Excel and the really cool things you could do in terms of budget strategies and forecasting, but we're also going to look at Copilot for Finance, which is a different tool, and we're going to show how it's different and what you can do differently in it. Now, given that we're on Zoom, you're always welcome to hit the Q&A button to ask your question. Just type it out, and we can respond during the webinar. And after the webinar, if you want to come off of mute and raise your hand, go ahead and hit the raise hand button and come off of mute, and we can take your questions live right here. So without further ado, let's get right into the content. But real quick, before I forget, I'm going to launch a poll, and it'll have a series of questions on your day-to-day habits and perhaps how you view budgeting and some of the needs that Copilot or AI can help you out there. So I look forward to those responses, and we'll review those a little bit later. With that said, I'd like to introduce you to Joey Martynowski, who is our Director of Finance here at Managed Solution. And Joey, you know what? Before I lose my voice, actually, why don't you go in and tell us a little bit about yourself and your role here at Managed Solution.
Sure. So my background before Managed Solution was I've worked at a variety of companies, kind of different sizes, shapes, and industries in a variety of different positions, but all accounting and finance. I've done pretty much every aspect of that, from your day-to-day accounting functions to financial planning and analysis for large multinational corporations, and here at Managed Solution, just run the finance and accounting.
This topic, as you know, it's focused on Copilot and AI in general and how it's transforming everyone's roles to try to do things a little bit more efficiently, maybe a little bit in more modern ways, maybe some automation. Hey, wouldn't that be nice? I wanted to ask you, like in your day-to-day, activity as you're punching through numbers and looking at finances, what are some of the biggest challenges that you're facing in terms of like financial budgeting or forecasting, or maybe even, trying to find the time to put together a well-developed like report that you might have to show?
Yeah, I think on that last one, you kind of hit the main point, and it's a struggle I think everyone has in finance, where you spend so much of your time in spreadsheets. I mean, there's so many great tools out there now, from Power BI to whatever your ERP system might be. Great systems, but at the end of the day, you still spend a significant portion of your time in Excel, in spreadsheets, trying to put together reports that I think the way I always like to put it is, I don't like having charts and graphs and reports that are not actionable. I think we need useful information. I think that's the biggest thing that I like to focus on. And I think that it is a big struggle. I think when we talk about challenges, you might have a big set of data and you say, all right, what do we need what does this say? What is this actually telling us? And how do we put it into a form where we can read it and not just for me, for a finance person, I'm sure that I'm going to be able to look at something a little bit differently than, let's say we want to take it to, operations, or we want to take it to sales, or we want to take it to the CEO of a company, or a board of directors or something like that. It's all going to be different. Everybody's going to want to see something a little bit differently, or at least understand the data a little bit differently. And I think that becomes a bit of a challenge, because you can sit there with the same set of data and you find yourself making 20 different reports kind of trying to tell the same story in just different ways that everybody else can understand it. And that's just time consuming. I think that's one of the biggest challenges, honestly.
So repetitive tasks, is that what is happening? Is that kind of a large part of your day-to-day life in terms of?
Yeah, and I think no matter who you are, that you end up doing that. From, if you're an accounting clerk somewhere, to CFOs of companies, I know you end up spending a significant portion of your time in Excel and going through reports and data and trying to make it look the way you want it to look and to see what you really want to see. And I think that, yes, it is oftentimes repetitive tasks.
How much of your time in the tools that you're using is spent in Excel versus other tools, other productivity tools? What would you kind of define, how you're using them?
Good question. I would say, I think it used to be that you'd spend 99% of your time in Excel. I think a lot of companies have started going to more BI tool. Power BI is a great tool. I think a lot of companies are starting to head that direction. But even still, at the end of the day, you still spend 75% of your time in Excel. I think when you export reports from any system, whether you're using a QuickBooks, or you're using one of the bigger, an Oracle, whatever it might be, whatever system you're using, you're exporting most of the time into an Excel file where you can put together reports that are useful for you. Even if you can customize, I know every system has all of their tools and they're great, but as much as you can customize those reports, you still end up doing a lot of export and working in Excel, whether that's, reconciliations, or just however you want to display your P&L files, and whatever it might be that you have. There's just so many different ways that you need to produce reporting. And a lot of times, no matter what the systems are, you still end up in Excel. So
are you finding that when you're exporting things out of other applications or systems that right now, like, you end up with a raw Excel file, maybe it's just a CSV file or something that is just non-formatted, and then you kind of have to build it from scratch? Do you find yourself kind of doing that?
Yeah, I think that is a significant portion of the finance work. I think what happens is, whether it's an export of data, or you're just trying to build something from scratch, even, and sitting there manually keying things in, I think at the end of the day, yes, a large portion of the time is, here's the output of data. Number one, is it formatted right to where you can do anything with it? And two, does it even have all the information in there that you need? I mean, oftentimes, again, no matter how good a system is, you're going to export something and you're going to go, shoot, I want to show, gross margins of whatever it might be. And you end up doing some of your own calculations anyway in Excel.
How often are you leveraging things, tools, maybe it's in Excel itself, but to leverage tools to forecast or do what-if scenarios? Are you are things like that part of your day-to-day outlook and trying to figure out what is happening next to our finances here?
Yeah, I think, again, a lot of people are starting to use Power BI and tools like that a lot more. I do, for sure. I like a lot of them. Especially if you have, a large set of data, a variety of data sets that you might have. For sure, you can use your BI tools for that. But I will say, again, when it comes to forecasting, budgeting, especially, at the end of the day, I still end up using Excel, because I build my own formulas. I make it so that, here's your input cells. You can pass that along to different groups in the company, your department heads, and say, here you go, sales, please fill in these different key inputs for me, and I can spit out all my outputs based on that, whether that's, spreading your budget month to month, even, is something as simple as that, or, what departments they need to hit, or where it goes, it's those kind of things. Again, I still think you end up using Excel more often than not.
Do you foresee like any help in maybe there's an easy button where, hey, write me a formula that will help me calculate out this what if scenario or forecast. Is that something that you feel like could help?
Yeah, I think so. I think one of the things I recently watched an old commercial from the 90s, I think, when Excel first came out, and they were showing how great this is. Look at how great you can build your own little table and and it was awesome. It was so funny to look back on it, and I think, wow, it's so much better now. There's so many things we can do. There's so many formulas, but the issue is now that it's gotten that far and you can do so much. There's a lot you have to do. You have to, you know a lot of formulas, but also just, I mean, you're keying in formulas all day, right? You're trying to build a structure of a file. How do you want that chart to look? How do you want things to look? It's you spend a lot of time doing those tasks. As cool as it is that you can now, it still takes a lot of time.
You're dealing with a lot of sensitive information. Obviously, there's a lot of intellectual property that we have here, but you might have to maybe perhaps follow other, compliance requirements so that we keep our insurance up, to date in terms of cybersecurity risk. Do you have any concerns about using AI, generative AI tools within your daily work task?
I will say sometimes for sure. I think if it's something that's a third party that, maybe I think trust is a big thing for me. If I know that it's a company that supports your business and really, their business is your business. They want to make sure you grow, you're safe, you're secure. I mean, I do like it's, part of why I like working with Microsoft, right? Like we know they're a very trustworthy company. The things that they do, they're not your data is not going all over the place. They're making sure that everything's secure. I think if I'm using an AI tool and I do know that there's a lot of add-ons for Excel and things like that where I don't know. I would find it hard to use one unless I had a good relationship or history with the company that I knew things were secure, because it is concerning. I do get it. There's a lot of data gathering that happens for, and not necessarily for nefarious purposes, right? People are trying to improve their systems and trying to help for sure. But at the end of the day, there are a lot of things it's sensitive information. You do not want that to be outside of your world.
Well, I know that one thing that really helps our customers, whether you're in finance, whether you're in HR, any role really within the organization, is that there seems to be a use case of Copilot for just about anyone. And one of the areas that I frequent quite a bit with our customers, and when we're training and providing some adoption to Copilot and make it more effective, is we go through a scenario library here. And this is a really nice resource. Anyone can get to it by going to adoption.microsoft.com. And I wanted to kind of drill into some of the areas. And if you follow along with me, there's an area here under functional areas called finance. And what you can do is you could pull down the little section there of finance and see there's a lot of different scenarios listed, right?
Yep.
I was just curious. Well, let me ask you this. Is there anything that kind of sticks out in terms of what might match something that is very common along your line of work?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, a few of these, if we're being completely honest, I'd love to. Accounting document evaluation is great. Financial insights, I think, is huge. Intelligent sales forecasting, probably some of my favorite. I think reconcile financial data might be one of the biggest ones in the future too.
Yeah, well, why don't we go through a few of these? In fact, let's start with financial insights. Let's just dig into that one, for example. Let's look at the steps here. Maybe let's talk about step number one, if you see that, payment reconciliation.
Yep.
And the theme here, and actually, as you scroll down a little bit more, or look at the other little kind of objects there, where it says Copilot in Excel, Copilot for Finance, Studio Agent. These are all different tool sets within Copilot. As you can tell, it's not just Excel. I mean, yes, you are the director of finance, and you use Excel quite a bit, but as you can tell, Copilot is like pretty much everywhere.
Yeah.
So let's talk about it. Payment reconciliation. I'm sure you just mentioned like there's times where you might have to export some data, do some reconciliation there. One thing I wanted to mention here was that Copilot for Finance, it shows it's in preview, but quite frankly, if you simply go to copilot.microsoft.com using your organizational ID, you can actually start providing some prompts to look at documents, look at financial documents that are in your purview, and do analysis on it just outside of Excel. So I was just wondering, I'll just kind of spark a question here. You mentioned you use other applications, but are there other applications within the Microsoft apps that you're commonly using as well? For
Yeah.
example, PowerPoint, Word.
Power BI, I think, is a
Power,
big one.
yeah, you mentioned Power BI quite a bit, and actually that's actually a very unique aspect of this because Power BI is totally integrated into the Microsoft ecosystem. It has its own Copilot capabilities. I tell you, Copilot is like embedded everywhere whenever you're using a tool. But yeah, tell me a little bit about maybe a day in the life of a payment
Oh,
or
yeah,
something
actually.
like that.
No, it's a good one. We do have so this is actually a really good example for us. Right now we have two different systems that we use, operations, and then our, an ERP system that we use for our financial reporting and accounting and everything that we do. And then we have to reconcile all of our payments with ConnectWise is what we use right now. So we'll pull out the data from one system, pull out the data from the other one, and have to make sure that those all connect. There's scenarios where some of those payments come in automatically, other ones need to be entered manually. So as you can imagine, there's a lot of room for discrepancies, whether it's a duplicate payment or something that was missed. It can happen a lot, and that needs to be done all of the time for us.
I'm going to pull up just one more scenario that we could walk through. Let's see what might be interesting here. Intelligent sales forecasting.
Yeah, like that.
Okay. All right. You kind of like that topic, right?
Yeah, I want to forecast sales.
Yeah, that's right. So from this perspective, as we look down on the steps that are involved here, look at this. There's not any other tool other than Copilot for Excel that's listed here. So maybe let's walk through it to see if this might match something that you might do or want to do on a day-to-day, or I should say have available for you within your role. So cleansing the data, you've already mentioned that. You might receive some raw data files coming from other systems, and you're providing some ways to prepare that data, right?
Yeah, for sure. I think a lot of what happens is you get a data, whether it's in a table format or not, and you need to format it as such so you can create your own reporting. A lot of it is just, yes, cleansing the data, making sure the exports that you have can actually fit into whatever it is you're trying to show, whether it's, like a sales forecast like this, or what has been sold, or where you're at currently and where you're at in the sales cycle on certain things. And first and foremost, you have to make it so that it's usable.
Yeah, absolutely. And then that step two, analyzing sales patterns. Now, when I look at a big spreadsheet with just lots of numbers, I have no idea what it's telling me right away. Before Copilot or before AI, or maybe you're not using AI to its fullest yet because it's still fairly new in its infancy. Yeah. What are you doing? Like, do you see patterns just naturally as a finance expert, or do you have to do certain things to see patterns?
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's, one way or another, you still have to put together some sort of reporting that makes sense to you. And I think that's where oftentimes you do get a little bit stuck, right? You start creating a report, but it's a blank canvas in reality. Once you have a big set of data, you need to figure out what you need to find. So for me, it's always, what are we looking for? So for example, if we said we do want to see sales patterns, whether it's timing or, like I said, how long it takes to close a deal or whatever it might be, you need to make that determination up front, but then you're going to spend some time and you're going to figure out, okay, what points of data on this table or this set of data that I have, what shows me what I need to see here. So then you start to put together whether it's a chart you're putting together or even just a little, a summarized table of things. You're still doing formulas. You're running old school pivot tables, and you're trying to do things that way. And I think that's a time consuming thing to do. I think if you could ask
Yeah.
Copilot to do some of that for you, that would be
Yeah.
fantastic. And I feel like we are
Yeah.
getting there.
And it definitely is providing that. I think one thing that really helps is as I'm punching through data in the role that I'm in. Um, what's nice about having a co-pilot next to you is that it gives you other suggestions. So once you get some data that you want, it's going to say, well, have you thought about looking at this in a different way? Or did you want to analyze maybe a different category within this chart? And so that always kind of lends itself to getting a lot more questions out, to, get as much knowledge out of the data as possible. Might be something helpful, huh?
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's like I said, a lot of times you end up doing a pivot table or whatever it is. And each time you do that, you're sitting there, you're creating a new table, or you're trying to format things and essentially redo the work you just did to try to show some of the other insights you're looking for. And it would be nice to not have to sit there for a half hour or whatever it is every time you have to do that to figure out how you want to, you're trying to copy what you just did, reformat it, and do it the same way you had it. But with the new information you're trying to pull out, I do think that Copilot has the ability, at least it really looks like we're going to be able to use it to ask specific questions, and it can do it repeatable, and it can pull a table out or create a chart for you that you like, and just do it again with the different information that you have, so you can have consistent but usable data, I think, is what you're looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. What I like about it, which I'll show in the demonstrations coming up, is that when we want to ask it to provide certain data, so maybe we want to add a new column that analyzes certain areas. I'm just being very general, but I'll show you
Yep.
some specifics in a moment. But what I like about it is that you can actually hover over the example that it's giving you, and it'll just kind of like put that little column there temporarily. You hover your mouse off of it, it disappears. So it allows you to either determine if this is data I wanted to commit to the Excel data there, or that doesn't look right. So it gives you definitely an out in case AI gets a little wonky sometimes, because we all know
It's still learning.
it's still
But
learning.
But you know what? I think that's true with the human too. I mean, if you're sitting there and you put in a formula on something and you say, this is what I'm trying to do, and then you put a column in your table, and then all of a sudden you go, yep, that wasn't necessarily what I was trying to do there. I think, yes, it's very true that I think in both scenarios that can happen. But it's nice that it pre-fills things in for you.
Yeah, that's right. Well, good. I'm just going to wrap it up with just one more question, and that's really, how do you envision AI to be kind of helping in someone who is in finance like yourself? What does that look like in the future? Are you scared? Are you excited?
I think I don't know. I think I'm always excited about something like that in finance. I think from an accounting standpoint, as great as, like I said, there are a lot of great tools for us out there. Whether it's Power BI or even just in Excel. Excel's gotten great. It really has. But there's still just so much manual work that you put into it that I think done right, we could probably take a lot of the repeated tasks that you continuously do out of the equation. I think just for when it comes to what AI is really going to do for finance and accounting, I mean, I think there's a couple of ways to look at it. I think, quick wins. I think there's probably some things pretty quickly everybody could probably start doing. I know when you pull data out and you go, now I've got to put together these reports every single month or week or whatever it is that you do, you can just start asking Copilot to do those things. I do think that there's quick wins there that we can find, I mean, now, today. And I think that's great. I think long term, there's more and more that we'll figure out that we're even better at. I think that we can kind of ask it to do, more of the slightly more complicated tasks and trying to determine things. And honestly, it does understand a little bit of what you're asking already. It's not the worst thing in the world already. I mean, already it's heading in the right direction. And I do think there's some knock-on effects too. I think it'll condition us in finance and accounting to maybe change the way we do things a little bit for the better for me, because I think it's better that we format data the right way. If we really want to look at large sets of data, I think it's good to get in the habit of putting it in a format that's closer to a database, something that you can use and create repeatable reports with. And instead of, I think oftentimes I've seen it all from an accounting side, but people will pull data and they start adding columns everywhere and trying to make their own little formulas and do things a million different ways. And it's not necessarily repeatable. And that way, and if it's a monthly task, you're redoing that every month and it's crazy and it's not always the same. You can't go back to the last one. You have to go back and look and see, and they're all different. And I think it'll help us be more consistent with the way that we do things so that we can use it and we can use it properly and save ourselves a ton of time in the meantime. So I think there's a lot of things that we can do in the long term that are going to be great.
Well, that's awesome. And thank you so much, by the way, for your time and providing your insight and what you do day to day and how you see Copilot and AI kind of coming along in that area. Um, and I'm glad we're talking about a very light subject, right? Just up before the holidays, finance, accounting, numbers, right?
Yeah,
So hopefully you don't have any heavier conversations than this subject matter during the holiday season. But yeah, really appreciate your time, and
yeah,
I'll catch you around the office or wherever soon.
awesome. Thank you so much.
Well, I don't know about you, but I always find it helpful to hear from people who work in finance and are using financial tools day to day and talking about how AI and Copilot can really benefit what they do on the day-to-day basis for better efficiency and better value overall. And speaking of value, is Copilot really worth it? Well, let's take a look at some of the numbers from a study that was done this year, actually. And Forrester actually did a study on Microsoft Copilot for SMB, and what they found was that through the usage of Copilot, there was an up to 6% increase in net revenue over the last year, up to 20% in operating cost efficiencies and savings, and 25% acceleration in being able to do things like new hire onboarding. That's a lot of things that are due to some of the automation that Copilot brings. So a lot of great value there. And what the study found was that there was an astounding 353% ROI on the return on investment of using Copilot. Pretty amazing. Now, it is showing there was some investment done. $271,000 in investing in some Copilot tools and implementation and things like that. That's definitely not a small ticket to have. But when you think on the return on investment and the savings, and say like that $1.2 million in benefits that you get out of it, there's a lot of potential with it. Something else I wanted to show you was that Copilot's early impact definitely had a lot of impact. As you can see, there's some pretty significant percentage numbers here in terms of faster case resolution if you're in customer service. If you're in sales, there's higher revenue. In marketing, there's conversion rates that are much higher than usual. Human resources, finance, legal, you can see that there's definitely a trend upward because of the efficiencies that Copilot brings. So there you have it. Lots of ROI to be had from that perspective. Hopefully the benefit of having Copilot and the ROI value that it provides makes sense. Now, why don't we take a look at a real world situation with Copilot for Excel? And if you're using Excel in your daily life, let's see if there's some ROI value by seeing the following demo. At this time, let's dig into some of the Copilot for Excel capabilities and especially if you're in the situation where you need to understand a budget forecast and do some analysis on some past, maybe some quarterly results from your organization. Here I have in front of me, I have a spreadsheet that it's a CSV file. It was exported perhaps from my general ledger system, ERP, maybe even QuickBooks. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to leverage Copilot to do a lot of the analysis for me a little bit easier than I can alone. So let's put this in motion and we'll take a look at some of the data here. Now, the fact that it's in kind of unformatted data and also that it's sitting in a spot where there's no autosave capability, Copilot is most likely going to complain, making sure that I save the file somewhere in OneDrive, SharePoint, somewhere where autosave is going to be turned on. But also, I need to make sure that instead of a CSV format, I need to convert it into an actual Excel format. So once I go through the process of saving the file as an Excel format, you'll see that Copilot actually turns on right away on that right side there. Now, as I look through the data, one thing that really helps Copilot along is if we can convert it into a table. And the later versions of Copilot don't necessarily need you to do this much anymore, but it's still really good practice to convert your data into a table where it's going to be much more easily understandable by Copilot. So we'll go ahead and we'll insert it as table, and let's take a look at the data so far. Now, one thing that I'd like to do is I like my data looking a little bit nicer. And so the first thing, and this isn't really finance related, but this is more Copilot related, but I'm going to ask it to actually split those project names into separate columns so I can maybe do some better sorting from that first name, last name type of thing. So let's just start there, and I'll go ahead and generate that prompt. As you can see, it's generating the formula that it's going to help me create two separate columns for first and last name. So from there, that's pretty cool. Now I can go ahead and if I hover my mouse over insert columns, you'll see that before I even commit it, I can kind of see what it looks like. If I like it, I'll go ahead and insert it. I can always hit undo if I don't like it. Well, what can we do next from here? Well, because I like my data in a certain way, I just want to maybe rearrange the columns a bit. So there I go. Now, the thing is the profit margin column, column J, is kind of in a decimal point. So I want to convert it into percentage so that it properly reflects that. And that's easy enough. I think everyone, for the most part, knows how to format, their data into percentage, into currency, and things like that. And that's what I'm doing right here. I'm just asking Copilot to do it instead of me actually going through the menu items to actually apply all those changes. So easy enough, still, quite helpful, but let's get to the better parts of the situation here. So one thing that I've seen is that the Q1 revenue and Q2 revenue, what I'd like to do is compare them with each other. Is one higher than the other? Is one lower than the other? So I'm going to ask it to do a comparative analysis, and what it's going to do, it's going to spit out a formula, it's going to spit out a summary, and it's going to allow me to insert a column if I want. So let's take a look at the results here. So you can see that there's a summary, there's the formula that I could use. I could even use that formula myself if I wanted to add it in there. But even easier, let me go ahead and hover the mouse over insert column so I can see what it looks like. And if it looks good, looks pretty good to me, I'll go ahead and insert that. Now, I'm of the type where I like to add a little bit color to the data that I'm looking at. So Excel, as you probably know, has conditional formatting, and we can actually add some color to highlight those areas. For example, highlight those areas which contains higher. So there we go. We have all of the data in there which will highlight anything that shows which quarter was higher. Pretty easy enough, but let's go a little bit further now. So between the Q1 revenue and Q2 revenue, what was that percentage difference? Now, it's a relatively easy math problem, but you know what? I sometimes have to think about it, and especially in Excel, you kind of have to put that in a formula. Copilot does it super quickly. We can look at the percent difference between Q1 and Q2 results. You can also see that some of those results are in the negative territory, and maybe I want to actually highlight those areas that are in the negative territory. So I'll again use conditional formatting for anything that is showing in the negative. And as it looks at the data, it'll comprehend it, and it's going to display in red highlight that anything that is in the negative, it's in a red highlight right there. Oh, perfect. All right. I'm on my way. I'm doing some analysis of the data, but now I need to go into the projections. So I know what Q1 is, I know what Q2 was, and I want to project what is it going to look like perhaps in quarter three of 2025. Well, here we go. We can actually ask it to estimate what that difference might be, what that pattern might be in quarter three by applying a formula that it knows about based on what I prompted it. So I can look at those results. I can see that Q3 revenue results, looking good for the most part. And I'm going to say, let's highlight those areas in green that are probably showing like the uh, top five performers in that area. So I can actually see, hey, that green category are top five performers. Another thing that Excel does really well is multiple things at once. So in this case, I'm highlighting rows in orange, I'm defining as the development project, and I'm applying conditional formatting to areas where, hey, maybe I need to show that the development project is in a certain category that is displaying, certain areas to make it stand out so I could easily locate that data. Going even a little bit further, let's go ahead and actually show insights. Now, this is probably what Copilot in Excel is best known for. If you simply ask it to show insights about the data, it's going to find that first insight that it thinks is pretty important. So if you just want to get a quick summary of the Q1 versus Q2 revenue comparison, there you go. Very easy to do. But even better, we can go in, take a look at all the data, and we can actually say, you know what, I want to add all insights to the grid. So Copilot is going to analyze all aspects of that data, and it's going to put together some meaningful data. Maybe it'll put together some unmeaningful data. You have to kind of check it yourself. But as you can see, there's a lot of great graphs and analysis that goes into this that you can put into, say, like an executive report. Now, one cool thing is that you can show breakdowns in a specific area. So here I'm asking it to show a breakdown of designed revenue between Q1, Q2, and Q3, or what's predicted in Q3. And we can go ahead and generate that chart quite easily. And really, in the background, it's creating a pivot table and it's creating a pivot chart as a result. So, long are the days where you have to know how to put together these pivot tables together. Quite easy. Now, really cool thing here I want to demonstrate is that if you wanted to predict what happens if I increase the percentage from 5% to 6% profit margin, and what would that look like in, say, like a quarter four analysis. So here's what is happening. It's predicting that Q4 revenue, and the problem sometimes it doesn't always know how to create like the new columns, but it's going to give me the formulas at least. So now I have the formulas to work with to provide the prediction. And what I'm going to do in this case is I'm going to take those formulas and I'm going to clear out the data from what I had previously with a 5% margin, and I'm going to go ahead and apply those formulas to show a 6% margin in what it potentially could be in Q4. So here we go. I'm simply just adding columns. I'm utilizing those formulas that Copilot showed me what to do, and there you have it. You have a good Q4 revenue predictions for the coming year in 2025. So a lot of capabilities. There's even a lot more capabilities coming with Copilot, especially with Python running in the background as your code, where you don't have to be a coder to do this. It's going to do a lot of it for you, and it'll be a really great assistance for any kind of financial manager, any kind of CFO role in your organization. Now that we've covered Copilot for Excel and its ability to do budget forecasting, what is Copilot for Finance and how is it different? Well, let's take a look and see how it is different. And first off, I wanted to give a shout out to Minda Tracy from My Online Training Hub, who's allowed me to show this content and be able to demonstrate Copilot for Finance's capabilities. So the differences really are that, first off, Copilot for Finance is still in preview. It comes in the form as a plugin. So a plugin is something that you can use from your add-ins button in Excel to be able to download plugins, and you'll see it there in the marketplace to add into Excel. The nice thing, in many ways, is that Copilot for Finance is supported in older versions of Office. So Office 2016, if you're still running that, you can use Copilot for Finance because it's a plugin that supports that version. Now, the tool is a little bit different in a way that it leans heavily on data reconciliation. So we're going to show you how that applies in this case. Now, when you're also running Copilot for Finance, you're still going to need some Microsoft 365 licensing because the data that it uses is going to work best when it's stored in OneDrive and SharePoint, and it's going to be able to use the AI features that are part of the Copilot family. Now, every day, someone who works in finance is probably working with payments received, sales invoices, things like that. And it is very time consuming to be able to reconcile those areas. So Copilot for Finance helps quickly identify those variations. Maybe there's multiple payments received on a single invoice, and this is where it really saves a ton of time. So we're going to take a look at this demo and let's get after it. So this might represent a day in the life of someone like you who might be in finance and you're working with sales invoices and payments received, and we want to do a little reconciliation because we're finding some discrepancies here. Now, as you can see from the information I have, this again might have come over from a CSV file, but there's 30 entries of data in sales invoices and 34 entries of payments received. So something is off, and our job is to figure it out and reconcile it. Now, I sped up the video because I'm putting this in formatting of a table. We need table formatting just like we did in Copilot for Excel to do a better job. Copilot for Finance is right there in the upper right when you add it as a plugin. And to add it as a plugin, you're going to actually go to add-ins and you're going to search for it in the marketplace, and it's real easy. Find it and then you can add it in there accordingly. So let's click on Reconcile Data right there in Copilot for Finance, and you're going to see it recognizes the worksheets that I have open, sales invoices, and there's a table called sales, and payments received, and there's a table called receipts. So let's click on Next now that we've uncovered that, and it's going to create some rules here, and these are mapping rules for what we need in order to determine kind of like the source and destination mapping of what we're going to reconcile here. Now, it did a pretty good job at understanding what I need to reconcile. But if you wanted to go in and manually change those settings, you can go ahead and do that manually so that you're ensuring that it's looking at invoice ID versus invoice ID, as well as amount and amount received. And that's really kind of how they're listed in the tables that I have. Let's go ahead and click on Next now that we have our mapping done here. And it's going to run a reconciliation report. And in really almost no time, it found out quite a few discrepancies, and it's listed it and organized it in unmatched transactions, potentially matched transactions, and really kind of fully matched transactions. Now, let me go ahead and undock this. You can undock it. You can move this Copilot for Finance window wherever you'd like. And right there, it shows you the report that it generated. I'm going to show you that a little bit more later. But let's go ahead and highlight the areas of how it organized the data here. So as you can see, there's unmatched transactions. Let's highlight that area, potentially matched, and matched transactions. So I'll go ahead and expand all the data here. Now, I'm not too concerned about matched transactions. That's great. I know exactly what areas that it got matched, but I do have a problem, especially with unmatched transactions. There's definitely something different there. So we're going to troubleshoot it. Let's go ahead and click on that button at the bottom, troubleshoot a transaction. And when we do so, we actually have to select a cell within that row in order to get the transaction details and have it troubleshoot what the issue is. So in this, I'm showing that I somehow received more money than was actually received in the payments received. And so we want to take a look at the root cause of that. And it does a pretty good job at identifying and gives me an analysis of what to do and what to research. So that's great. It gives me a little bit of homework and exactly where I need to look. Now, the other area that I really like is that if we go into potentially matched transactions, let's troubleshoot again, and let's take a look at this payment received. And the reason why it's showing up as potentially matched is because this payment actually came from two separate payments on the same invoice. So this is where you're trying to find the needle in the haystack, and you're seeing that there's actually two distinct payments on the same invoice that equals that $840.30. I could go back to that payments received and identify those two transactions, and yes, indeed, they're on the same invoice. So sometimes that happens. Sometimes customers will make multiple payments on the same invoice, maybe split them up a little bit, and this is where it really helps out. So a lot of very quick reconciliation analysis here at our fingertips. And there's one more thing that I wanted to show you here, and that is in its ability to perform reporting. So again, let's go through the steps again. I'm just going to click Next, have it generate the reconciliation report, and as it gives me the results of the summary, the nice thing about this is that I can go ahead and export this as a PDF, and the large language models of AI have kicked in, and it's giving me in plain English here of exactly what happened, where the reconciliation issues were, and really gives me a nice summary that I can give to an auditor or my manager or anyone up the chain of command, so to speak. So a lot of capabilities for Copilot for Finance. It comes as a plugin. It works on older versions of Office, so really a lot of good things there. Well, that just wraps it up for our Copilot webinar. And going into the new year, I hope everyone has a wonderful holiday ahead of them, and I hope your New Year's resolutions come to fruition. Now, before I leave off, I wanted to remind you that Managed Solution offers quite a bit in the way of Copilot assessments, workshops, chatbot builds, you name it, pretty much anything to do with Microsoft Copilot. And, for example, the Copilot adoption roadmap. Lots of things go in here, and we can tailor to whatever needs you have in particular. Typically, we start out on a few days of discovery, discussions, engagement, and planning, and then we actually go into really having some hands-on use on Copilot tools and things like that. So reach out at the QR code there, the link above. Our phone number's right there in case you want to take advantage of that. And again, have a wonderful holiday ahead of you. And now we're opening it up to questions and answers, and let's review the poll results at this time.